Whooping Crane Chronicles is a collection of stories to learn from, to ponder, and to celebrate. I'm Mike Forsberg, a conservation photographer from the Great Plains. I've spent the last 5 years, camera in hand, exploring the natural history of whooping cranes across the continent, meeting the people who love them, and discovering how these tall, magnificent, and rarest of cranes are navigating our 21st century world. This podcast elevates conservation stories and uplifts these birds to showcase their natural history and beauty in the hope of keeping these birds around for generations to come. Join me on the journey.
Yeah.
Somebody's coming over that did a book, you make sure you put it up on the coffee table right before they get there.
Yeah.
Or make sure you got that thing
I have
out.
3 of them right there. They're beautiful. I mean, gosh, there's so much to be proud of.
Well, you know, these birds connect a lot of people together, and I just think it's important to have a lot of different voices. And that's what we're doing here is trying to hear from lots of people. And figured, well, what the heck? You said yes. So,
would you look at the time?
Said, yeah. All right. Well, hello, everyone. I'm here in Bastrop, Texas, with a new friend, Susan Lindfors Taylor. Susan, glad to have you with us. So you and I have never met each other before in person until out on the driveway about 10 minutes ago. But we've started having a conversation and email back and forth about 6 months ago or so around this song, and a particular verse in this song that I'm just going to read.
Yeah.
I think I'll look around for a whooping crane. I think I'll look around for a whooping crane. What do you think this pain is, God? You think I'm crazy, but I'm not. It's just I look around for a whooping crane, and I can't find one. That's from the song Whooping Crane, written by Eric Taylor. Somebody sent me this song. I'd never heard it before, but it was sent as a song that Lyle Lovett sang.
Right.
And I decided immediately, it's like, man, I mean, the timing is great. It's a beautiful song. There's a lot of depth to it. And I really needed something in the opening essay that I was writing for this book, Into Whooperland, and that just seemed like a great way to start. So at first, you know, we were thinking we'd be reaching out to Lovett, but we realized that Lyle covered it, but he's not the person that wrote it, and so that brought us in this sort of a circuitous current stream to you. Found you, reached out, and when I sent you an email, I didn't, you know, you never know if anybody's going to respond to stuff completely out of the blue, but you did. And I've really enjoyed getting to know you through correspondence over the last several months. But can you tell our listeners a little bit about who you are and where you live?
Yes. I grew up in Austin, Texas, and then my husband, Eric Taylor, had been living in Houston, like before we were ever together. And, well, when I first got a guitar, I was pretty newly out of college. But I moved away several times and came back and moved away, came back. There's some stories there. But I was in Washington, D.C., and I decided to come back to Texas. And first thing I did was I went out to the Kerrville Festival. I made some friends with musicians there. And then they lived in Austin, and we came out to Austin, and they were always doing these treks, like Eric Taylor's playing, you know, so we'd, you know, get in the car and go to Houston. And so the first time they told me that, I was like, okay, you know, and and they would sit in the front row and like weep. I was like, oh, wow, okay, you know, but that's how I first met Eric, and that he was already friends with this group. And so then, since I was just kind of fledgling, you know, musician, I started opening some shows. Like our paths kind of crossed here and there for a good number of years, and friends in common. But he had come out toward Columbus, Texas. I ended up moving from Austin there. And then really briefly after being in Columbus, we moved out to Weimar, which is like this little German Czech town.
There's a lot of German checks.
A
around
lot,
here.
a lot. If you look at the phone book, it's crazy. But
Not many vowels.
no. But we were even like 4 miles out of the town, way out in the country. And we were out there for 17 years. And so Eric was performing and traveling. We were midway between Houston and Austin, so we were always coming through Bastrop. And so we didn't need to be in the Weimar area anymore. And then I was thinking trying to get close to Austin to be closer to my family. And Bastrop was the first place that we looked because we were always driving through and we thought, it looks pretty cool here.
Yeah, there's hills and there's pines.
Yes.
And there's a beautiful river.
Yeah, yes.
I
like it. Well, I mean, for me, it was such a great surprise, to hear from you about the song. It's just sort of having someone just show up, like just appear. And, I don't know, it's meant a lot to me. And just how much care and respect you've had around the song and toward me. But Eric always told me he wrote that song when he was 14 years old. And I think it was one of the first ones that he completed. And such a stunning song to me. So I don't know what prompted him to write. I don't know all the thinking he was doing. I don't know that about a lot of his songs. But he was also, throughout his life, way before I knew him and through, was very taken with Native American and Indian. We have shelves of books of all different things. And so I know that was an element of the song, like related thing.
When was like Eric, if he was 14 when he wrote that song, what year was that roughly?
Well, that would have been like 1963. He was born in 1949.
Okay.
So,
yeah. So in 1963, whooping cranes were probably at less than 50 birds.
Yeah.
Hardly any.
It's amazing.
Hardly any at all. 1940s was their low point, around 20.
Yeah.
And then they slowly started to come back because of some education,
right,
some conservation efforts, and eventually a series of laws, Endangered Species Act, protection of habitat, so forth. So so when he wrote that song, there were less than usually what's standing in the line at a Starbucks on a Sunday morning, right. Probably, right?
That's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about Eric as an artist. If you could describe his music himself in a nutshell, what would you describe?
In a nutshell.
I know the nutshell. It can be a really big nutshell. It can be like a walnut or something rather than a peanut.
Yeah. Gosh, it's hard to know how to describe. Primarily, he's a storyteller, I would say. And people would always, say, well, who does he sound like? And I say, Eric.
He sounds like
I don't think he sounds like anybody else,
No, that's
kind of his own. One thing that there are so many things I admired and respected about him, but one thing that I just always thought was amazing was that was always his career. There were times he did some other stuff, but he never did. He was just a writer and a performer. Like, he never had to do any other kind of job to support that, which is amazing because that business is a hard business and it kind of keeps getting harder. But I don't know. He's a voracious reader, but he wouldn't just. I look at all of the books and say, okay, this would take me probably the rest of my life to read, But he didn't only read them, but he reread them and he took notes and he really studied them and studied plays, Sam Shepard and a lot of Southern writers. And when people would kind of sit at his feet, and be like, hey man, Eric, how do you write? How do you put it? And he'd always just say, read. That was what he really believed in. And I also appreciated, like, with his writing, like, he never forced anything. He didn't believe in writer's block. Like, he didn't like when people talked about that, but he wouldn't force it. He didn't feel like he had to put out albums in a certain time span. It felt like if he worked on something and it wasn't coming together, he'd leave it alone. Yeah. But he'd also just take notes all the time. Like, if we were watching anything on TV, he'd be writing stuff down, and then he'd be in the airport and he'd be writing about people very colorfully that were, like, around or sitting next to him, and some of it's very funny. But he was also very protective of his writing. So like if he was working on something, if I knew like he was working on a song, I would stay way clear, you know, because I just wanted him to focus, you know, not have any kind of distraction. And then I would never try to look at like what the notes and stuff were, because it's sort of like when he was ready to try to play something, he would come in the office and say, hey, listen to this. And that was always really exciting, you know, to kind of hear what he was working on. But I really respected that, you know, he didn't want it to be seen until he was ready, you know.
Yeah, I understand that.
So, yeah. But, you know, I guess I've been thinking, it's funny because this has made me think about a lot of things that I don't talk about very much, you know. And one thing I really have always loved about his writing is he, like with Whooping Cream, he was very sympathetic or noticed hardship. You know, like people that were down on their luck or people that were kind of invisible to society. And I really like that about his writing, because if people would go to concerts, he's showing a light on that. It's like, here, look at it. You know, think about it.
Grab to it.
Yeah, and just some really amazing things. I feel like the last years that he toured and performed, more and more he would write like spoken word pieces, you know. He'd sit and he'd write, and they were sort of like introductions to songs, but more than that. And he really enjoyed, like, there's a theatrical thing to it, and it was like everything would become kind of interwoven, you know. So in a way, like if a concert had 2 sets, it would be like a 2-act play, kind of. You know, it's not like the songs were like each other, but he just had a way of weaving that together. And the spoken, not everybody got it. Like the spoken word stuff, I mean, he would write it out and he would practice it. And there was repetition. There was like a rhythm to it, you know. And sometimes people chose to be like, he's just talking and talking, you know. I mean, it's so repetitive. Like they thought like he was losing his train of thought, you know. But that was like a really deliberate thing.
Sounded like he was ahead of his time.
Yeah,
actually,
I think so.
In a lot of ways, right?
Well, you know, he was influenced a lot by the beat writers like Jack Kerouac and William Burroughs. And Jack definitely has a lot of repetition and kind of stream of consciousness stuff. And he was also really good, I think, both musically and just talking about leaving a lot of space. You know, like when he would tell a story on stage, there would be like these long gaps sometimes, and I would be watching him. Like a lot of times I'd be on stage with him and I was thinking, I can never do that, just like leave this
because it was uncomfortable, the silence.
Like I could never just comfortably do that. Like I feel like say everything, you know, and be done with it, you know. And he would give it a lot of room, and then he would, if anybody played with him, he really liked players that didn't try to just jump in whenever there was like a quiet spot. It's just like, let that be quiet, you know. And that was something I noticed a lot. I appreciated. Oh, he was doing it. It's kind of a tangent, but he was doing an interview. He was on the road with some other songwriters. This wonderful songwriter, David Olney, who's also a great storyteller. I always considered them closest to each other in terms of like songwriting ability, and they adored each other. And David Olney was kind of this irascible guy. He lived in Nashville. And so they were in Europe with a couple other songwriters. They were doing like a Songwriter in the Round tour. And so they were in Germany, and they were in some kind of train car doing an interview. Like the others had to wait, and one by one they go in. And so the German guy, Eric could tell this story better than I can, but he was really pressing Eric, like, Eric, what is the best song ever written? Eric, what? And Eric was being coy. He's like, well, hey man, I mean, I haven't heard all the songs. Like, I haven't heard a song in Africa, you know,
Right.
you know. And the guy's like, no, you know, what is the best song ever, you know? And he just would not answer it. So finally, David only figured out a way to call into the show, and he's like, tell him to stand by me. You know, Eric's like, no, I don't think that's it, you know. But I don't know, like, what tugs at people or what grabs them. I used to love to watch people watch Eric, you know, because, like, I would hear all the stories and the stuff hundreds and hundreds of times, but I never got tired of them. And just people could be so enraptured, you know. Like, I think people like storytelling. I mean, maybe there's oral tradition to it, but it's almost like a visceral thing. Like, it's just like an immediate reaction to something. I mean, with Eric, especially words, but It could also be something instrumental that's just so beautiful. But even just with singing stuff, I like to see, watch people get taken by him or not. There's one song he could do is it was like a combination of songs. It's on the Great Divide record. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't a song he wrote, but there are some things in the song that could offend people maybe. And it's really funny in this one concert. And it was at this country club, like stone walls and very fancy. So there were these two young couples that came up and they were sitting like in the second row, and this is in this beautiful, beautiful room. And so Eric started, I felt that sometimes I think he would start with a song to just kind of weed out the crowd,
Oh, really?
So I was like, who can take it, So he played that song and I could tell this one woman was getting really mad. Like it was really offending her. And Eric could drag that song out, so finally they finished and the woman got up and she like hauled the other three away. She's like, we're leaving. So they left. And as soon as they left, like this little 70-year-old lady ran up to the front and sat down. I thought, what? Like, you think it'd be the opposite, but she was just like, yeah, so anyway.
You were on stage with him some?
Yeah, I would sing with him.
Mm-hmm.
Some, yeah. Yeah, we worked on a lot of things together. Yeah.
You sent me probably 5 or 6 CDs and listened to all of them. And the first one I listened to was the earliest, and the last one that I listened to, of course, was the latest.
Yeah.
And for me, myself, I couldn't really put that in a box either. It was the evolution of a man.
Yeah, it was.
And an artist, and just a very organic, sort of honest growth that to me felt like had a lot of life experiences packed into it, and you could hear it as he got older. Mm-hmm. The lyrics changed. His voice changed a lot. Like all of ours do, right? Yeah. And I was just really, really taken by it. So I guess it's a veiled attempt to make sure that the listeners of this go find some of Eric's work.
Yes.
And yes, listen to it, discover it for the first time, or rediscover it.
I always wanted more people to know about him than did, he wanted that too, but...
Is this Blue Ruby Music?
Blue Ruby Music, mm-hmm. Yeah. The newer website now is erictaylorsongwriter.com.
All right.
But Blue Ruby Music is the business that Eric started. He had a bulldog named Ruby, and so he called her Blue Ruby because he said there's nothing like her. Hmm. So that was the name of the business.
Can you name some of the albums of his?
Yes. So the very first, it was a vinyl record, was Shameless Love. Came out in 1981. And then he put out one, just his own name, Eric Taylor. And that one can be pretty hard to find now. It's on a label that wasn't ours. And one called Resurrect, which is beautiful. Well, they're all beautiful. And Scuffletown, The Great Divide, and I'm thinking in order. Hollywood Pocket Knife is one of my favorite ones.
Wow, what a great title.
Yeah, Hollywood Pocket Knife. And then Live at the Red Shack. That was a nice project where the Red Shack studio, which is literally a red shack in Houston, got like Lyle Lovett and Nancy Griffith to come. And Eric said, let's all come together, because they both covered his songs, and they said, let's do the songs, but do them how we sound now, and so that was a great project. It was a really emotional one, in a way. And we even squeezed like 24 chairs in the studio, and so there was a little bit of audience. And so that came out in 2011, and then the last one was Studio 10. And then since he passed away, I put out it's a new record, but it's an archive, like even earlier than Shameless Love, in the tape recorder of the 1970s, taping these live shows. Yeah. That's what we had to work with. So it's called Early Eric Taylor. It was
sounds awesome.
It's awesome.
Yeah. I can't wait to hear it.
Yeah.
You said something earlier about Eric being very empathetic towards hardship. People that have had hardship, or cultures that have had hardship, or you could even relate that, I would think, probably because of the Whooping Crane story that he wrote, the song that he wrote. Do you know much about Eric when he was growing up? Did he spend a lot of time in nature? What was his touch with the natural world?
I'm not sure how much in nature, but He had a really, really hard childhood. And so there were a lot of bad experiences there. And then he left that house when he was 14, and got himself through college. Yeah. And he actually went to Georgetown on a baseball scholarship because he was a pitcher. And I don't know how nature oriented he was, but he was always watching, and he's a great observer, I think. Right.
How about you?
I love nature. I love being outside. So
as a kid?
Yeah. It's just kind of always. I liked my childhood. We grew up in Austin, so I have a older sister, younger brother. Yeah. And we're all like, she's only 13 months apart. I'm 13 months older, and then my brother's a year and a half younger. My parents were professors at UT.
Oh, they were, huh?
Yeah.
What did they teach?
My father taught African literature.
Oh.
And so he was in the English department, and then my mother taught early childhood language acquisition, so how children form language. So she was in the education department. Mm-hmm. So, but I've always been, I don't know, I like sports and hiking and, being out where we were in Weimar, or outside of Weimar, we were just on a county road, and you couldn't even see, it wasn't that far in the gate to the house, but it kind of wound around so you couldn't really see the house from the road. Yeah. Which was really nice. It was nice for both of us, but for Eric when he'd come off of the road, it was a nice place to just kind of retreat to. Yeah. But I would just walk. I would walk for hours, like on all these county roads, and so I started just bringing a camera, and it was no fancy camera, but I was just like, yeah, okay, birds, and then when I started taking pictures, I was like, what? There are so many kinds of birds out here, Right. And so that got me more and more interested. And I would take pictures of anything, any kind of wildlife that showed up. And there was a lot of wildlife out there. And there was always something that would surprise me, on a walk.
Are you still taking pictures?
Yeah, I try. Yeah. I'm not schooled in it, but I really like it.
Neither am I.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
You remember the first time you saw a crane?
Probably, I think going to Rockport was the first time, like going out. I did the trip down there. Some friends here, like in this gardening group. I'm a terrible gardener, but there's this gardening group. And one of the women discovered, they were like, what does your husband do? Does he play country music? And I was like, no, but she had learned the Whooping Crane song. And so she said, we should do a trip down, and go out on the boat. And so I don't know, that was 3 or 4 years ago.
So that wasn't very long ago.
Not long ago. Yeah. I knew of them, but I had never actually seen them.
Do you remember who you went out with? Like what boat you were on?
Captain Tommy.
You were on Captain Tommy's boat. Okay, yeah, good.
Yeah, but then I went a couple times last year. I think in February, I went down to see the cranes, Captain Tommy. Then I did more of that photography trip with, is it Kevin and Lori? Yeah. And I really liked that because it was nice to have 5 hours. Right. And I was amazed, that rookery that was just out in the middle. I thought it was a forested, swampy kind of place, but it's just this spit of land.
Oyster reefs and everything else. Yeah. We'll, Kevin and Lori are going to be our next victims on the podcast episode.
So am I. But it was a blast. And that day, Lori, they were kind of fighting about who was going to be the captain, and she got to go. She got to be the captain. So we got out there, and she got the boat kind of wedged, where it wasn't going to rock so much. Yep. And it was really windy. I think it was really windy, against us. Mm-hmm. So I was trying to practice taking pictures of birds in flight because I'm terrible at that. But if they would fly, they were just kind of staying in the same spot. So it's
perfect.
But I still don't think it worked out that well, but it was fun to try. Yeah. It was so fun to watch them, with all the, and their plumage, and doing all their dances for each other. And some of it wasn't whooping cranes, the great blue herons were already having little ones. And
yeah, February is a great
really
time
fun,
because you're getting great blue herons and others that are these, that nest in these rookeries. Yeah. They're all starting their nesting in February, and then you're getting the warblers, these neotropical migrants that are coming up from Central and South America, coming up across the Gulf of Mexico, and then just sort of spilling out of the sky.
Yeah, right,
and finally reach land. And then you have the cranes, both sandhill cranes and whooping cranes, that are getting a little itchy because it's springtime and the hormones are cranking up, and the adults that have nests 2,500 miles north in Wood Buffalo are sort of looking at the clock and thinking it's about time to go. And if they've got kids, the kids are mostly full grown at this point, but Junior's going to be with them on their migration north, and there's a lot more dancing, a lot more energy, and all that. So and like right now is not the opposite, but these birds are just getting here. So we're sitting here today talking, and it's about 3:30 in the afternoon, 4 o'clock maybe, and if you're a whooping crane or a sandhill crane and you're migrating, you're a daytime migrator mostly.
Right.
And so this is about the time that you're starting to look for a place to land and settle in. You want to have enough light to be able to make sure that where you're landing is safe. Might go find some dinner in the field or in the wetland and then go to bed for the night. But a lot of these birds now are coming into Texas, and the northern half of their journey is done. They've gone through my backyard in Nebraska, and they're heading south. And it's a great time, because this time of year when they're arriving, those that have winter territories, they're checking it out.
Yeah.
They're running the perimeter. They're kicking anybody out that shouldn't be there. They're seeing what life is like
down here.
Be like.
Yeah.
So
living out in Weimar, I did see one year, it was probably like 2017 or something, a field that had sandhill cranes. They had kind of decided, like, we'll stop here. And it was a field kind of off in the distance. So sometimes I would use my camera's binoculars to be like, what is, are those turkeys? And then, I zoomed in, it's like, wow, sandhill cranes. And they just kind of chose that spot. And then I kept thinking, come down where we are, but I never saw them do that. So I guess going to Rockport and then seeing the sandhill cranes, and then Paladuro. I saw the cranes. Maybe like this year going to Paladuro, maybe it was too warm still. Why I wouldn't have seen them.
The migrations have
October.
been slow this year, just because it's been pretty warm further north, and usually in the fall. Birds migrate south if they're pressed, by weather, resources run out or whatnot. But this year it's been really mild.
Yeah.
So everybody's late.
Yeah.
They're probably not late to their watch because they don't have a watch or keep that kind of time, but to us they are.
Yeah.
Tell me about your experience in Paladuro with cranes.
Well, that was, I think 2021. So Eric passed away in March of 2020. It was a week before the pandemic. But he wasn't very specific about things he wanted done or how to take care of things. But he was really, really specific about being in Paladuro. He was very specific. He wanted to be cremated, but then he said, take me up there.
Can you tell our listeners, like Paladuro? You and I know what we're talking about, but
it's up in the Panhandle, so it's just a little southeast of Amarillo. If you look on a map, it says it's 8 hours from Bastrop, but it is not. It's 10 hours. It's at least 8. Plus another 2. I had always wanted to go there with Eric, not in the way that I did, but before he had passed. And people describe it as like the Grand Canyon of Texas.
Yeah.
So it's similar and it's different too, but it's so staggering to me because when you start getting up there and it's just flat and it's wind farms and it's just flat. And then when I did the trip in 2021, it took me a year and a half to get up my nerve to go. And then I got to like where I was staying outside of Canyon, Texas. So that's about 20 minutes west of the canyon. Right. And so the next morning I was out, like the sun was just starting to come up, and I started driving out there, and it was just flat. And I was driving, and then I looked over, and there was this gorge, and I was like, oh my God, like, wow, and it's just crazy. It's just sort of like you just come up on it, and it's just so beautiful. And literally, when I drove in, it literally took my breath away. And it made sense. I thought, of course, this is where he wants to be. To me, it's such a powerful place. And it's powerful in a kind of a spiritual way. But, it's just majestic and so beautiful. And there's a lot of Indian lore. There are a lot of things that happened right there. So that was really important for Eric. But he, like, I don't know how many times he had been, but he has a song called Two Fires that he wrote from being at Paladuro. And he had done this motorcycle trip, and he was coming back through, and he decided to stop at Paladuro. And so, like, his nature, like, he set his bike down and covered it up somehow. And he started walking around, and anywhere that said no trespassing.
That's where he went.
Yes,
right? Yeah,
yes. Like, he didn't like to be told what to do. So he just, like, made his way, and he got up, like, up on the rim, like, out on this mesa. Like, just, and he had, like, some camping stuff, and so he was just up there, and he thought, well, I'll make my fire. So he's got this little thing. He's digging a fire pit, got a fire going. But he thought, I'll just be as far away from anybody ever, and he made this fire, and like 100 yards away from him there was another fire. And so he wrote this song, Two Fires. It's really beautiful. So then, I made the trip up there in 2021, and a friend of ours who's a potter, she lives in San Marcos, he had told her, will you make my urn, for the ashes? And so she was like, okay, and so she had done that. And so Eric would always say to me, like, we get into these long evenings, it's like, I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to talk about it. But he'd say, you take that urn, you throw it across the canyon, So I had all that, and I gave myself 2 days to hike around. I just didn't know. Like, I didn't know how quickly I'd figure things out. I wanted to find a good spot, and I didn't know what it was like. And so the first day that I went out, I thought, well, I have to be up on a rim, because I'm supposed to throw it across the canyon, like miles across. And so there was only one trail that goes up to the rim. And it's like 2.5 miles. You just wind your way up. And so I got up there, and then I was looking for a specific place, and it wasn't marked. And anyway, so finally I thought, well, it's all the rim. So I just figure out a spot. And I was so nervous about doing that, and I had his music with me and was listening, but then I wanted to do it when nobody was around and people kept walking by, but actually doing that, I was so afraid. And then I felt like, I don't know, it was just so emotional. It's like a letting go, maybe.
Yeah.
And then I thought, okay, come on, like, I was clear, okay, do it. And I threw it, but I don't think I ended up throwing it that far. And then it crashed. I hope that it broke, because I told Beth, who made the urn, I said, yeah, but I'm going to break the urn. And she said, you break it. Throw it and break it. So I hope that that's what happened. But there was something really freeing about that, And as I sat there for a while, and then I thought, well, I'll try to find my way back down. About 10 minutes later, like, this hawk came blasting by me. And that was kind of cool. I liked that. So anyway, so that was the first day. So the next day, I just thought, well, now I just have a day just to explore, and I picked some different trails. And Eric's son had gone out there. He had some of Eric's ashes too, and he said, well, if that's where Dad wants to be, and so he had told me, like, specifically what he had done and where he was and how to find it. He took all these pictures, and so I thought, well, I'm going to hike around, and then I'll go try to find that spot. And so I did that, and I found exactly where it was, and I made my way up there. But so while I was walking up there, I could hear birds calling, and I had heard other things, ravens and other birds, but I heard all this calling and calling and calling, and I looked up, and it was way up in the sky, but they were just circling. They were just like, it was almost like they were just floating, in this slow circle. And I thought, well, I can't get any kind of good picture, but I'll just try taking any kind of picture of them because they're so far up. So I did that, and then I was where Eric was, and beautiful view, and so I was sitting there, I was listening to his music, and I thought, well, I'll just check the camera and just see what they are, and it was whooping cranes, which was really great. And I think I was checking it right when that song came on, like my little iPod, and
isn't that crazy?
Yeah, so it was great. Like, part of me felt like they showed up. It was like it was great. Gradually they were floating, and they kind of drifted across where I couldn't see them, but I was hoping, it was kind of late in the day, so I was hoping, like, maybe that's a stopping point.
Well, the way cranes migrate is they ride thermals.
Yeah.
It's like an elevator. Carries them up and up and up, and as they're going up and up and up, they're calling and calling and calling, and then they hit this upper level wind, and it's like a slippery slide.
Yeah.
Then they just set their wings, and they glide. And the gravity pulls them down eventually. And then they find another thermal.
So
and then
that's how
ride
they do
that
the
up.
migration.
Yeah.
That must take a
and that
long
way
time.
they save a lot of energy.
Right.
Because with those updrafts, then they don't burn as much energy. And then once they get to that
Yeah.
upper level wind, then all they're doing is
They're just coasting.
just coasting on it. And so they can go, 300, 400 miles a day, sometimes longer if they need to. But that time of day, later on in the afternoon, those thermals are starting to slow down.
Right.
They're starting
So
to
that's
get
what
cooler.
they were doing.
So then they come down to start to drop. But they're calling most of the time, and I don't know of another bird that you can hear from the ground that may be miles away from you.
Yeah.
You can't even see them.
Right.
And then you hear them first, and then you finally see them if you're lucky enough. And they will, when they're turning into that light, they just glow like diamonds, and keep going. So
amazing.
Cultures around the world have ascribed to cranes a very spiritual quality to them. Birds of heaven, if you will.
Yeah.
And there are stories like yours with Eric that I've heard from other people too, that just all of a sudden, there they are, at that one moment.
Right.
And I think there's reasons for that.
Yeah.
That we can't explain, and we shouldn't explain.
I think so,
we can just
too.
accept. So yeah, I think about Eric, and when he wrote this song when he was 14 years old back in the mid 60s, what he would have thought of seeing that many birds together now, and if he would have even believed it.
Yeah, right.
Because it's a hopeful story.
It is.
It
is.
They're not out of the woods, but it's a hopeful story.
Yeah.
Right.
There's a friend of mine, he's a brilliant guy who's into gardening, and so he and his whole family, they're very nature and live close to the earth, and he's told me one day, he said, just watch animals and do what they do, because seems like they naturally have a lot more to figure out.
Well, they've been here a lot longer than we have, haven't they?
Yeah.
All of us. They've got a lot to say if we listen.
Yeah. Just pay attention. And they're so huge. I mean, wolfing cranes, that's remarkable how big they are.
Yeah, very human-like in their mannerisms.
Yeah.
Yeah, and one of the persons I've talked about a little bit, Liz Smith, she's now recently retired from the International Crane Foundation, but still lives in Rockport. It was a couple years ago. We were right outside of Rockport on refuge land, but along the highway.
Yeah.
There's a creek called Cavasso Creek. And with her spotting scope, she could see a whooping crane out there that had a single black band on one leg and a metal band on the other. Yeah. And there was a small group of birds that were captured and banded down in Texas back in the late 70s, early 80s.
Wow.
So based on that combination of that single black band and that silver band, we were looking at a bird that was over 40 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And she looked it too. She was sort of bent over a little bit and a little rickety, it seemed like, on her feet. But she had a big, strong, strapping male with her.
Yeah.
So she was fine. So
like a cougar bird.
Yeah, exactly.
No, but how long would they live? Like my parrot is 37.
Yeah, so you have, an African gray?
He's a yellow nape Amazon parrot.
Okay.
So he's green, but he has a yellow back here. Actually has a bunch of different colored feathers underneath, but he's 37.
How long is he going to live?
I think at least in their 50s, I think.
Yeah.
And Eric got him as an egg.
Is that right?
So they have a lifespan.
Well, I don't know if cranes live as long as parrots do. I do know that the oldest recorded crane was, I believe, a Japanese crown crane, which was in the royal court in Japan, that lived to be early 80s.
Wow, that is long.
So you probably don't live that long if you're in the wild.
Yeah.
But these birds are 20, 30 years sometimes, like the one that we looked at, 40 plus, maybe.
Yeah.
So, long time.
That's a long time.
What's the parrot's name?
JT.
JT?
Yes.
Huh.
He's very colorful.
I bet he is.
Yeah, he still calls Ruby, who's been
Really?
gone for a long time, like all these different dogs we had. And a lot of times he knows like the thing that comes next. So like if he hears a cork, like you're uncorking wine, he makes a pouring noise. Or one day, like he likes being in the kitchen, like that's his spot, and so where we were in Weimar, like the office was right off the kitchen with a landline phone. And so one day I was in the kitchen, the phone started ringing. So I was walking to get it, and he said, "Hello?" "Yeah." "Uh-huh." "All right." Yeah. So I'll just do like that. So he's a trip. He's very entertaining.
Does he like music?
He does. He loves music.
Yeah.
Yeah, he loves it if I bring a guitar in and play. Like he just loves that. And so if I play something quiet, he's like quiet, and then I play something louder, he gets louder.
Yeah.
Or sometimes if there's a break, he makes like a little noise like right in the break.
You could take him on the road,
Well, we did.
You did.
The last few tours we got a van so I could travel with Eric, and I could kind of travel on road there, and so we took JT, and then the dog is Sugar Boy, and so it was like our family.
JT and Sugar Boy. It's like a movie.
Yeah. So JT, I don't know why Eric did it, but he named him for JT Van Zandt, who's Towns Van Zandt's son. When he had dogs for a while, he was naming them, like he had a pug named Ella. Like it was musical kinds of names. He had a Rottweiler named Pearl for Janis Joplin. So, but then there's just JT. But he's fun. He's a lot different than a dog or a cat.
So you've been pretty quiet about your music, but...
Yeah, I really just, these days I kind of just play at home. I think, I don't know, I'm never very comfortable on stage. It's like I'm good like with Eric, like more behind the scenes, or I could be on a stage with him in his show, forever. But doing it myself, I don't know, I just get so nervous about it.
That's probably not uncommon though.
Yeah.
Right?
Maybe.
I think what people want is just you to be you.
Yeah.
Just to be authentic.
Yeah, and just in the last year and a half, there's a good friend in Elgin, which is a town, it's about 20 minutes north of Bastrop, and he's a great musician, and he's helping me figure out how to play some Eric's songs, which I really like, because Eric used different tunings, and he had this really intricate way of playing, and so I can't figure him out that well on my own, but this guy will help me.
It's a crazy idea. Port Aransas puts on a Whooping Crane Festival every year in later February. And because this book is coming out, they're creating their own event, kicking off the festival, and they've reserved the community theater there for that, which is usually where they have bands.
Yeah.
So it'd be cool for you to come and play.
Play Whooping Crane?
Yeah. That would be pretty cool.
I would do that.
Would you do that?
I would do that, sure.
Would you really?
Yeah, sure.
You understand this is just recorded right now.
Yeah, everything's on tape. I would do that. I was serious. That would be an honor.
There you go. I think we're going to have to talk more after this.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. Well, I think Eric would have liked cranes a lot.
Yeah.
Their personality sounds similar.
Yeah.
Somewhat defiant, very resilient. Pay no attention to borders or boundaries.
Right.
They just are who they are.
Yeah. I've never met anybody, everybody's different, but I've never met anyone remotely like him. But, it's hard to explain. I don't know if it's explainable, really. Kind of like, I think, like the magic with some of the crane stuff. It's like I don't feel like there are words for it, really.
No, sometimes things are beyond the reach of words, right?
Yeah.
And they just get in the way.
Yeah, that's true. You have to make the space.
Let it be music.
Yeah. Yeah.
Susan, it's been fascinating talking to you, and I'm so damn glad and get to meet you in person.
Yes.
Sit down across the table, and now it sounds like we're going to do a concert together. So.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I can't play and I can't sing, but I can show pictures. So.
Well, thank you for writing the book, and thank you for finding me.
Oh, you're welcome.
And including me.
Cranes are great connectors. They connect habitats, but they connect people more importantly than anything, I think. So.
Right.
It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for talking with me.
This has been the Whooping Crane Chronicles. Stay tuned for more.
Think I'll look around for a whooping crane. Think I'll look around for a whooping crane. What do you say this pain is God? You say I'm crazy, but I'm not. Look around for a whooping crane, you can't find one.